Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has stepped in to take over as chair of the Southern African Development Community. He's taken over with immediate effect after the incumbent Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina fled his country after weeks of protests. And during a virtual extraordinary SADC summit, Ramaphosa said from its inception, SADC has stood as a beacon of solidarity.
We gather today, not merely Your Excellencies and Your Majesty, to deliberate on the agenda before us, but to affirm our shared commitment to peace, stability, and prosperity of our region. From its inception, SADC has stood as a beacon of solidarity, but also a community founded on the values of unity, peace, mutual benefit, and sovereign equality. As these very values are being tested by a convergence of challenges, we are called upon to act with both urgency and foresight to stabilize the present while safeguarding the future. For the future of this organization lies in our ability to earnestly deploy our institutional strength to find sustainable solutions to the challenges that we face. Indeed, the challenges confronting our region are profound, but they are also not terminal. Our collective sense of regional solidarity at this time is in many ways our strongest currency.
All right, let's now bring in Professor Christopher Isike, Professor of African Politics and International Relations within the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria, to weigh in on these developments. Prof, it's always good to have you with us. Welcome. So President Cyril Ramaphosa's meeting with the Pope, we know this relationship was birthed back in '94. And of course, the biggest objective for this collaboration is to work together on humanitarian aid initiatives, among other initiatives.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Yes, indeed, it's very good for South Africa, because it's an opportunity for South Africa's soft power and alignment with the normative values that the Vatican represents. You will understand that South Africa's concept of Ubuntu, the belief in a shared humanity, aligns well with the Pope's vision of inclusivity and compassion, which he has expressed since he became Pope in May. So this offers Pretoria a soft power avenue to be able to frame South Africa's foreign policy not just as a resource provider or regional power, but a normative voice in global ethics, humanitarianism, and human rights diplomacy, which is important in an increasingly capricious world.
All this happening, during the cloud of President Donald Trump still throwing knives at South Africa. Professor, how do you think this actually looks upon the government? Upon the governance of the country, the sitting government of the country, that you do have, a Pope that is willing to actually meet with those that the government is not willing to associate with?
Well, look, like I said, it helps with South Africa's soft power, value, and then there's a strategic leverage because that engaging the Vatican opens for South Africa moral diplomatic backing in multilateral forums like the G20. Support for South Africa's push for climate justice and resource governance. You remember that the theme for this year's G20 is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. So South Africa would need this kind of global support, global leverage, from important and normative influencers like the Vatican. So in a situation where you have an American president that is constantly, throwing the knives at South Africa, this kind of engagement with the Vatican and with the Pope, who is himself an American, is very useful for South Africa.
Absolutely, Prof. I mean, let's move on and look at the fact that South Africa is also ascending now with emergency to the SADC chairmanship right at the back of our G20 presidency that is to take place. That has also raised quite a few eyebrows, rattled a few feathers since Trump announcing that he will not attend, and that lately South Africa should not actually even be part of the G20 going forward. How will our SADC chairmanship actually address some of the current challenges like your climate change and energy, as well as water and other crises?
Well, look, it's another opportunity for South Africa to show its leadership credentials, to make it more visible as a regional leader. Stepping into the interim chair position that was taken from Madagascar, gives Pretoria a platform to shape the region's agenda, especially at a time when economic integration, value chains and energy transitions are front of the mind, regionally, right? And then also for agenda setting and economic transformation, this is useful. And then for South Africa to bring to fore its experience in strengthening governance, especially at the regional level, which is something that is kind of missing right now with the SADC. Of course, there are all kinds of challenges that South Africa will face. One of them will be the question of political legitimacy and internal cohesion within the region, especially when you look at the political instability in Madagascar, the variations in democratization in different parts of the region. But what all of these does for South Africa is to further cement its claim as a regional leader that superpowers like the United States cannot simply push aside or ignore.
All right, maybe, Prof, let's also talk about, while you mentioned Madagascar there, those latest developments within Madagascar where Gen Z protests have since been likened to have that common thread, as we've seen in Asia and other countries, of common concerns about living conditions, inequality, as you've just rightly pointed out, as well as widespread government corruption. The youth is sending a very strong message to their leaders within these countries who are so out of tune and touch with their struggles and want them out. It is about time, though.
Yeah, it's about time. This is again part of the problem of the state in Africa. I see that Madagascar has called itself now the Republic of the Refoundation of Madagascar. Refoundation means, going back to the basics and let's rethink our union. And this, the difference here is that it is just something that is proclaimed by the military. It's not something that is rooted in any meaningful engagement between government and citizens to forge out a proper social contract where citizens will know what their responsibilities are. The state, through the government, will know what its responsibilities are to citizens, and together they can engage in state building or nation building, as the case may be. In this case, the military has just on its own declared a refoundation itself as a refoundation authority to start afresh without taking into cognizance the views and contributions of the very people, the Gen Z you mentioned, that even gave rise to the emergence of this new government in the first place. So there's a fundamental governance challenge we have in the continent, and it comes from the disconnection between citizens and government, because, like you said, most governments do not even understand or fail to understand what their responsibilities are. And when they do, many of them have good development policies. There's the lack of political will to actually implement what has been decided in the interest of the country is missing. So we really need to address this question of state and governance in Africa.
I was going to ask if Madagascar's coup-volution was seemingly taking a familiar pattern to some countries within the continent there. I mean, we're talking about leadership challenges. It's happening right through. Professor, we spoke about Tanzania, it's Sudan, it's the DRC, and even in Zimbabwe, where they're even trying to further extend a ruler's lead. All right, Prof, we're going to leave it there. As always, thank you so much. A very meaningful engagement there with Christopher Isike on African politics as well as international relations at the University of Pretoria.